We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hey there, and welcome everyone to another Unmuted Monday. It's great to be here with all of you. This is our third week in a row. We sort of took a hiatus in September with some travel, and we've had 3 shows in a row. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, but it's been great to have all of you here. So feel free to drop in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. I'm really excited for this conversation today. I know it's going to be something that's going to be thought-provoking, that's going to be motivating, that's going to be a little bit of a nudge internally, mentally, that you need to move forward in your life in a way that helps you to feel a greater sense of confidence and a greater sense of clarity. So I'm so excited for that today. So let us know where you're joining us from. You can drop in the comments. We love to celebrate everyone who's here. And we know that we've got people here from often coast to coast and from, the other side of the pond. So feel free to let us know. Drop in where you are joining us from. Sometimes my LinkedIn feed doesn't catch up. Hello. Hey, Laura. Hey, let's see. Ali, welcome. Nathan's in Colorado too, which is where our guest is from today as well. Ali is from Oman. Welcome. Laura is joining us from North Carolina. Good to have you here. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. Our producer, Tim's in Pennsylvania. Today's guest is in Colorado as well, as I mentioned. So feel free to let us know. Again, we're happy that you're here. We see some new faces. Hi, Jill from Annapolis, Maryland. Good to have you here. Mark, 3 times. Awesome. Good to have you here, Mark. I think you're really going to love this conversation as well. So to get started today, we have an opening question we'd like you to think about. What is something in your life that you want to improve on? What is something in your life you want to improve on? Today's guest is somebody who, when I first connected with him 4 years ago on LinkedIn, was somebody that from our first conversation that I could see was somebody who was genuinely curious, who loved to learn, who was interested in developing a sense of mastery, and just had this desire to share what he was learning and experiencing and thinking with the people around him. And so I thought that would be a really great question for us to start off with today. So what is something in your life you want to improve on? As I'm thinking through that myself, something I want to improve on is creating more margin for myself. So I've had more travel over the past, a lot of this year as events are opening back up and they're live again. And sometimes I'm really diligent about it. And I make sure that when I travel somewhere, I book a massage for myself when I get there. When I come back, I have a lighter day from transition, that I don't overschedule myself so that I can really give myself that space to recover. And I was doing such a great job. And then last week, it started to kind of catch up with me, all the travel. And I realized for the previous couple weeks, I really hadn't built in much of that margin. It made a lot of the difference for me, for most of the fall doing that. And then another area I'm always trying to improve on is getting better at singer-songwriting, that kind of stuff, and singing and songwriting. And I'm getting better at it by I keep doing it. I keep showing up. I keep working with somebody who has a higher level of expertise and knowledge and experience and mastery in that area than I do. And it's something that brings me so much joy to make music. So it's something that I'm committed to doing because I see the positive impact it has in my life. So Tim sharing, wanting to improve on intentionally doing more things that make me happy. Laura sharing, Darian's amazing and so kind and thoughtful. And let's see, that gift is a good one. That gift is a good one for me too. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. My captions are overwriting some of the things that are being typed in. So, margin is a good one for me too. There we go. It can be a really tough thing to prioritize. But when we do it, we're like, it feels so good. And I use a wearable device. I use a Whoop band that I've had for 5 years. And the data I get from this tool really gives me some insights on how recovered I am, on other things that I might need to do to be supportive of my body. I've noticed over the past 2 weeks, just going to bed about 30 to 60 minutes earlier. I can be a night owl and push it. I've been going to bed, getting into bed by 10 o'clock, sometimes before then. And I noticed that so many of my metrics for my health, and immunity have increased exponentially since starting to do that, not eating late at night and making sure that I use a Hatch alarm clock to go to bed. And it goes through meditation, guided meditation, some kind of nature sounds and that kind of stuff is really, really helpful. So anyway, enough about all that. Feel free to drop in your thoughts in response to that if you haven't already. And without further ado, I want to introduce today's guest. So Dr. Darian Parker is a 22-year fitness professional, entrepreneur, educator, and executive. During his career, he served roles in the fitness and wellness industry, and he's worked extensively in both academic and private club sectors. He's currently the co-owner of Epic Leisure Management, the owner of Parker Personal Training, an adjunct faculty member at 2 community colleges and 1 university, a regular speaker at national fitness conferences, and the host of Dr. D's Social Network podcast. Earlier this year, he was named Personal Trainer of the Year. He got Personal Trainer of the Year award at 2023 IDEA World. He also loves gardening and spending time with his wife and daughter. So welcome to the show, Darian.
Hey, here we are back again. Hey, Rachel.
Here we are. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Always a pleasure. Those 4 years ago, I remember meeting you. We had a phone call. I remember this. I think you were finishing a run, and we were talking on the phone, and it ended up being actually a pretty long conversation, but it was wonderful. I think it just launched everything to where we're at now with knowing each other.
Yeah. Well, and you connected with my dad too, and I know anybody who my dad thinks is really cool, who thinks my dad is cool, I'm like, I just need to meet this person and connect with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I've talked to your dad many, many times on the phone.
Yeah. He's a good dude. He's been on this show a couple times also, so people may be familiar with him. And good morning to Maria, also joined us as well. So I'm curious, on this show we talk about unmuting ourselves, and we talked in the opening video, we kind of talked about what that means, but I'm curious from your experience, your life, what's a way that you have muted yourself or felt muted? And what's a journey that you've gone on to unmute that aspect of yourself?
I would say this started when I was in high school through early college, where I felt like there was just a bigger person wanting to get out, a bigger personality. But I generally just kind of didn't let that person out all those years ago. And once I got into college, I was really frustrated that I couldn't be myself. I was essentially muting this version that everyone sees now. That person was there. I didn't know how to get there. And so I just kind of gave up on it initially. And then I got really frustrated. And then in college, I took basic counseling skills and public speaking, and essentially just kind of forced myself to hey, I know this person's here. And so that was the launching pad where I said, let's hit the button here and change this, because I feel this person wanting to get out and wanting to be social, wanting to connect with people. I mean, it sounds funny to say, like, long time ago, I never connected with anybody back there in those times, but now it's a gigantic part of my life, which is just reaching out to people all the time. Rachel, as you know, you get my random reach outs here and there. I'll be like, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" Just being. I like to spread goodness and kindness to people, and just when it's unexpected, I think it's really important. So it's just been a journey of like keeping that button unmuted for
Mhm.
as long as possible, and just keep nurturing the connections that I'm continue to work on to this day.
Well, I guess if you, and it's interesting because it's funny, you have a podcast, right, about Dr. D's social network. So it's a bit ironic that you're like,
Mhm.
that version of me was there, but just not expressed for a long time. And I'm curious if you think back to that time when you had this bigger version of you inside that like wasn't allowed to come out or didn't know how to come out. What was the cost? What was the cost of you keeping that in, of you not expressing yourself, of you not fully showing up as yourself? What was the cost of that?
I think the cost was I just wasn't being true to myself, and I felt like the cost was I wasn't moving forward. It was a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness. I mean, this is in my early 20s, especially, and it just kind of that fear of getting out there and losing out on potential connections. I feel like ever since that time, since I kind of let that out the bag, just the whole time has been about connections beyond that. And that's actually, I've been on LinkedIn probably, gosh, now it has to be 15, 16 years,
Mm,
long time. And that's kind of when I started that journey towards something like LinkedIn and then in-person stuff. I would just meet people. Like once I realized, this wasn't worth that cost and I got out of there, I just started making it my mission to meet with
mm,
people as much as possible. So I was doing like 6, 7 meetings a week in person with people. I was living in Las Vegas when this really started, the wheels started churning. And then I would meet with all different directors in the fitness industry at studios and stuff, other personal trainers. Like my whole goal was like, I want to know everyone as much as possible. And I want them to know me.
mm,
And not for a reason of like, oh, people know me, but more of like, I just want to be a good resource to other people. So that
mm,
because everybody needs somebody, they need people. And I wanted to be someone that other people felt like they could come to, and they could talk about whatever they needed to talk about, whether it's in the business, outside of the business,
mm,
just be a good resource for other people.
mm,
I always think you're at your best when you're serving other people. I truly believe that, and when you're curious about other people. So we all need each other, and I like being there for people. As one of my staff at a club I used to run says, "You're the guy that runs into the fire. You're always running into other people's fire all the time." And I mean, that's a good thing, but also you have to have boundaries within that too. But I just enjoy connecting with people. And when you do that, something good always happens. I really believe that. And so
mm.
I wasn't willing to have that cost anymore. I was ready to catch that in and start moving forward.
Yeah. And I guess what's been the most unexpected when you think about that, it's like coming from a place of service. I feel like with a lot of things, if we make it about ourselves and we get like when we're holding ourselves back and we're letting insecurity run the show, we're often very much in this tunnel vision inside our own experience. And like what I'm hearing you say is when I put myself in the position of how can I serve another person, it sort of takes you out of yourself and puts you in that more transcendent sense of purpose that naturally unlocks a bit of that courage and that confidence. Would you say that is that sort of like what feels like happened?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those things you think if you're not feeling great or I need this motivation, you think, well, what can I do kind of just for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage people to have the opposite thought. What can I do for someone else? that usually becomes the fuel for yourself when you do
Mm-hmm.
that. I've experienced it over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with doing things for yourself. You should do things for yourself. But I often find that you kind of double dip. When you help other people, it ignites your own flame as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I just have seen this over and over again every week until now, constantly reaching out to people, chatting with people, just getting to know people. And wherever I go, wherever I move, I've moved a lot of times. I'm currently here in Colorado. One of the first things I do when I get to a new place is I reach out to all the people in my industry and set up meetings to eat with them just to get to know them, literally, just to get to know them and be a resource.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can tell the difference. I mean, I feel like when I first talked to you, I didn't feel like you had any ulterior motive. Like when someone has an ulterior motive, that is usually very apparent. And if you're genuinely doing it for the sake of wanting to have a connection, like if people feel the difference between those two things, you know?
Yes, they most definitely do. I mean, I would say it's funny on LinkedIn, you kind of, I get hit every day with, I would say, ulterior motive messages on LinkedIn. You've been on it as long as I have, and even short. There's a constant stream of that every day. And so I'm very cognizant of like, okay, how do I present this message to this person so they don't think that I'm trying to get something from them?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's, hey, how can I help create? It's always the same thing. It's kind of like, oh, how can I generate more leads for you? Or, oh, how can I, I'm going to make you happier. Watch this video, stuff like that. My thing is always like, I saw you, it resonated with me. I think you're an awesome person. I would just love to get to know you. That's it. And it's a simple thing. I think you got to get in through people's heart and then stay there and not try to focus on other things. I mean, and my business is all about talking, training clients, teaching students, and you always get in with people through their heart and relatability and being honest with them about where you stand. I think sometimes we struggle with that as we're trying to go, well, this is what they want me to say. Well, this is a business thing. And I mean, it is business, but it's people. And the best thing about it is that you get to know someone else and you get to care about someone else. You can never have enough love and care in your life, ever. You can have too much negativity, but you can never have enough love. And that's like a big thing for me.
Mm. Yes. Like I feel like my dad always says something like, I've never heard anyone say, you know what? I've just gotten way too many thank yous recently. I'm all filled up to here. Like I'm maxed out on feeling appreciated. Same way. No one's ever said like, I'm maxed out on love. I just can't take any more in. Like, that doesn't happen.
No one has ever said, I have too much love in my life. You know what? I can't stand that there's so much love and so much care. Like, there's something incredibly wrong if that is if that's something you're thinking.
Oh, I agree. And then, I think so much of what like you get to see as a personal trainer. And I just started working with a personal trainer locally who lives like 5 minutes from me for the first time in like a decade, because since my car accident, I haven't felt really strong or agile or flexible in my body the way that I want to. And I know that I do really well with accountability. And I'm like, I won't do this by myself. I will not. I clearly have not like a while. But I noticed that so much of personal training is more mental, emotional, and psychological than it is physical. And so I'm curious from your experience of working with thousands of people over the course of your career. Like, what have you seen? What are ways that people maybe limiting beliefs or thoughts that they have that hold them back and keep them stuck that you're often trying to help them like move through? And how do you help them move through?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say that for most people, they kind of come in with I would say, a very general thought process of whether it's weight loss or they want to get really strong and stuff. And I, this is probably going to sound counterintuitive, but I actually never think they're actually there for that. And I never think they're there for that. And then over the course of time, it's usually proven that it's really about companionship and connection and just feeling better about yourself. The majority of my clients have been with me well over a decade, my longest being 17 years now on running. And it's a friendship, it's a confidant relationship that happens to involve exercise. I learned this a long time ago, maybe like the first couple of years training. It's like you get people in the door through exercise, but they stay with you because of the way you make them feel. And the accountability is incredibly important. But make no bones about it, it's a relationship. You're entering into a relationship, a meaningful relationship. And so I think people, in many ways, they mute the training relationship initially and create a very small window of like, oh, this is about exercise. But once you unmute that button, you realize it's just much bigger than that. It's a much larger thing, especially if you like it's a lifestyle for you. And let's say with your trainer, you may not be with your trainer like long term, but you know, if you're with someone for an extended period of time, you're in a relationship, whether you know it or not. You have entered into a significant, meaningful relationship. And that's the thing that surprises people. And if you're really good at your job, you treat it as such. You care about them, you love up on them, you praise them, you give them accountability, all the same things you do with all the other people you care about in your life. They just don't think about it that way when they come in. But once they unmute that button, then it's like, oh, all right, this is actually another relationship I'm in.
Yeah. And I guess what are other ways, like what do you see them? I mean, I know one of the things that Nathan, people first, business follows. Like if you focus on the people, it makes all the difference. And like I know with me, I've had a lot of just lost some confidence. Like I was an athlete growing up. Like I played soccer, competitively and, in high school and, ran, I wouldn't say I was like a serious runner, but, did a half marathon and other things pretty consistently. And, I had just really lost kind of like my mojo when it came to my sense of confidence. And when we lose confidence in ourselves physically, it affects us emotionally and mentally. And so I don't know if any stories come to mind for you of any clients you've worked with that, without even naming names, but like any journeys that you've taken people on where they've come in and they've had a certain level of a lack of confidence, a sense of doubt about themselves and what you've seen them grow into. I'm curious if there's a story that comes to mind for you.
Yeah, it's a big story, actually. The client that I've had the longest, going on 17 years, it's actually amazing because when we started, he was just getting divorced. He was going through a divorce, and it was a very difficult year for him. I didn't realize how difficult until years later when he talked to me about it. But it was in many ways just a gigantic transition in his life. He was turning 40 years old, and he was also going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and was just a lot of different things transpiring. And again, it was about exercise initially, but over time, it was about building a relationship with someone where exercise was part of it. And so years later, he was telling me, he was like, Darian, you really helped me get through that divorce I had. I was like, I did? It's like, it was funny to me because we had never really talked about anything like that. And he's like, yeah, he's like, those sessions 3 times a week, just coming to see you being positive, working with me, caring about me. It was one of the biggest things that helped me get through that divorce and that really difficult time in my life. That's the power of working with someone. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to go and make this guy's divorce easier. I never thought about that. I wasn't thinking, like, oh man, I hope I help him transition to his next relationship. I just was like, let me just be good to this person. Let me care about them. Let me show up regularly, be myself, and let the rest take care of it. And it just became an incredible relationship. As he always says, Darian, you're the longest relationship I've ever had in my life outside of my children. And he said, this is something I will do forever. And that just hearing that gives you a lot of confidence. And I've heard that over and over again from so many of my clients. And it gives me a lot of it gives me confidence. And I think through my confidence as a trainer, they gain confidence as well. And we all just increase each other's confidence by being there for each other. And I treat all my relationships the same in that sense. Let me just be there for you. Let me be a positive force in your life. And that is going to change people. That changes people when you're good to them. And it sounds simple, but if you consistently can be good to another person, it will radically change their existence. Radically. The key part is consistently be good to other person. That's the hard part.
Mm. I mean, that's so true. That idea, because it's easy to be good to somebody like sporadically, right? To show up for somebody in our lives kind of here and there, and we kind of flit in and flit out, you know? But when someone shows up consistently for you and you know that they're going to be there and you know you can rely on them, you know that they have your back, you know that they're there to encourage you, because we can't, I mean, we can consistently expect negativity in the world, right? Like that's pretty much a given. But we have to like work toward building relationships where we can consistently expect and experience goodness, because they're not necessarily the most common relationships that people are in their day-to-day lives. So, you know, I'm curious in what other ways that you see people, like I know that so much of the time if I'm in the middle of um holding a posture and I'm noticing that I'm getting really frustrated. Like sometimes I might be doing something that requires me to like pull on a band and like hold a weight or something like that. I can notice this like tension and frustration kind of building up in my body in the middle of it. And I know that it's not because of the weight of whatever I'm carrying or pulling or holding, that it's often because there's some type of resistance I'm having emotionally to that feeling of having to persist through the discomfort, to persist through the resistance. And I know that that's where so much of the growth is going to come for me with the trainer that I'm working with is allowing myself to be in the midst of that. And I feel like what the trainer does is like hold space for that. So I'm curious, I know Laura mentioned here, she said, you know, you always prompt her to think deeper and to be a better person, which is not something everyone would necessarily say about their personal trainer. But to your point, if you think about it in terms of the relationship, we got you, Laura. If you think of it in terms of of being a relationship and taking it out of what a typical context of what a personal trainer is, you know, I think that can really change things. So I'm curious, what do you see? Do you see that happening, something like that happening where people are experiencing resistance to something? Maybe they're about to change in a way that's really positive, but they might get in their own way and hold themselves back. Anything? I'm curious about any stories or experiences you've seen about people doing that, like they're on the cusp of a breakthrough, on the cusp of growth, and there's naturally like this, like, why do we do that even? Why does that happen when we can resist when we're about to make a change for the better?
Yeah, I think this has been studied quite a bit, but to like make it pretty simple, a lot of it is just the expectations of what happens once you get to the other side of that. And so resistance is good. I mean, the process of hormesis, you know, creating some version of resistance, a stimulus that's greater than what you're used to so that you can improve is really important. But often people kind of mute their improvement or mute that resistance because, well, what happens when you introduce something, you get better at it, then people expect a different version of that once you get better at that. This many times happen with students where, okay, once you get a certain level of education, people will expect a certain level of knowledge, of intelligence at that point. You have to live up to whatever degree you have or knowledge that you now have. Sometimes that can be very daunting for people. And their training relationship, for especially with me, that resistance equals more resistance over time. It's like, oh, one of the things that people I think really mistake training for is I'm going to get better and then it'll get easier. That's not how it works. You get better then more resistance or other variables are applied to make it harder progressively over time. Uh, if you're running a 10-minute mile, the difference between a 4-minute mile is that 4-minute mile is a hell of a lot harder than that 10-minute mile over
Mm-hmm.
time. Or that it's not like just because someone became great at running the mile, it's easy for them. No, it's incredibly difficult, actually, at that point. So if you think about it, the resistance is going to lead to more resistance, an increase in level. And sometimes it's difficult to see yourself at a different level because it's difficult to handle the responsibility of being at that level. That happens with clients over time. It's talking them through. It's like, listen, you've now shown proficiency in this movement, this activity, this exercise. Now we're going to become more complex in that movement. We're going to provide more resistance, whatever variable that means. That means it's going to get harder.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the idea is that many times people come in with this concept that I'm going to get in better condition and things are just going to get easier. I mean, the things you used to do will be easier, but the new things will be harder. And you'll always be exposed to newer things over and over again over time.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's just a microcosm for life. It's that, you can be proficient in something, but it's like, what do you want to improve upon? Like that question in the beginning. That means there's some resistance. You're going to have to improve. And if you want to keep getting better, you're going to keep facing resistance pretty regularly in life.
Yeah, and when I think about what I'm hearing you say, what you've said a couple times today in the conversation so far, is that the importance of having accountability in the midst of this. I think one of the things that helps us to be more courageous, to have a greater level of confidence, to move through things that are hard, is when we know we're not doing it by ourselves. And so I'm curious, for somebody who is often a source of accountability for other people, where do you go for accountability? Like, who holds you accountable, and how does that work? Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I haven't been asked this much, which I think is interesting. But definitely my wife. My wife is a big accountability machine. She's very good at looking at me and saying, "Hey, you know what? You need to cut back a little bit here. You're doing a little too much." I have this thing. I end up doing a lot of things for sure. I can improve upon saying no more often to things. She's good at that. I also have a mentor who is excellent, Dr. Karen Scarpella. She's an excellent mentor. I meet with her once a week. I'm very big into mentorship. I think as much as I like to mentor other people and be there for other people, I have other people that are there for me and give me good advice and introduce me to other people as well, so that I can increase my connections and increase the amount of opportunity I have to be a positive influence on other people. So I think accountability is really important, especially in the training relationship. It may be the number one thing that most people actually coming to a trainer for. They may not say that, but it's generally the reason. It's difficult to do things on your own. It's no different in that relationship.
And I guess back to you on this, like, also, where do you find? I mean, I think sometimes the assumption is that when someone's in a position of being a personal trainer, my background's in health and wellness, right? That there's this perception and assumption that if you're in a certain type of role, or because somebody's a leader, or because someone works in a certain industry, there's often this assumption that they must not struggle with the things that they help people with, which is so not true. And I've shared some of my own journey with that here, of like burning out and other things that I've gone through that have been totally counter to how I might, from a title perspective or training or background, people might perceive I wouldn't have those issues. So I'm curious for you, what are the biggest challenges that you personally face around mindset, around any place of stuckness? I mean, you mentioned, holding back your greatness years ago, but now you're stepping into spaces and being recognized as like personal trainer of the year and have a podcast with hundreds of episodes and are a leader in your field. I'm curious, like, what, if any, places where you struggle with mindset, where you get stuck or held up or held back sometimes?
Yeah. I would say probably something that people aren't used to hearing. And but I like to say it out loud because I really think it's important. This isn't just my business or different things, but it's really important. There's just days where I don't want to do what I'm doing. And just be honest. Like some days I wake up and there's a struggle. I'm like, I really don't want to train anybody today. Like, and it's just honest.
Mhm.
Now, I still do it because, there's just times in life where there's just inertia and you feel like, I'm just not feeling this today. But, once I do it, I feel great. Um, and I start really feeling the vibe of it. And it always teaches me that, like, sometimes, that thought process, that feeling, it's not a true thought in a sense that, like, you get energized when you're with other people. And but that the stuckness is like you against you. You sometimes tell yourself these things that you don't want to do or you can't do, or today I'm not feeling it. That's why I always tell my clients, I'm like, you can never wait until you feel good to work out. You'll never work out. You'll never feel great. You always have something going on. You'll be waiting for this incredible day where everything aligns, the stars and planets align. You feel amazing. Your body feels incredible. As someone who's been an athlete, a collegiate athlete, exercised my entire life, that is a very rare feeling. A very rare feeling. You cannot trust that. So you have to work through it. And so I got to show up and I got to give an incredible effort. And to me, that's my biggest thing for myself. My biggest calling card is I'm consistent. I just show up regularly. That's like my big thing. And if I was telling my clients, if you show up regularly, you've done 80% of the work. You've literally made it if you've showed up. And then the 20% is just you doing the work. Showing up is the biggest part, no matter what it is, whether it's your training sessions, whether it's your partnership, romantically, friendship, whatever. If you just show up consistently, you will literally be 80% there for that. So I try to do that with, my speaking and stuff like that. When I go to conferences, just show up, be there, talk to people. It's going to be all good. It always is. I've never had a negative time when I've showed up consistently positive for other people.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is so much of it, really. When people look at what people that are successful, long term, whatever sense we might mean successful, they have greater impact, they contribute more, they grow their business in terms of impact, reach, finances, whatever. They are people who show up consistently. And I know one of the things people have asked you a lot, and because you shared this with me previously, and I'm curious where you are on it now, is that people look at somebody who's successful and they're like, well, you must want to scale everything you're doing to the highest level so that you can have even more impact in what you're doing. And one of the things I really like and appreciate about you is you are just so clear on what you want to do, irrespective of what everyone else thinks you should do. And so I'm curious, like, where that comes from, and just tell us a little bit more about that thought process that you have.
It's funny that you remember that I said that. Yeah, I think I've doubled down on that hard. Like even in my business, I feel like a lot of my colleagues who are very wonderful, the idea is to scale the business, to have as many clients as possible, to have as big of a reach as possible. I am the opposite of that. I am just trying to work with people one on one. I'm not trying to have massive groups and get as many clients as I can't be effective if my reach is literally everywhere with clients. I need to give time to the people. Is why I always have a live service, virtual or in person, because I just feel like my best attributes are when I'm staring down the barrel one-on-one with somebody and I can just love them up that way. I can't give that to a gigantic amount of people. I don't think anyone can give that level of personalization to a massive amount of people. And so for me, one of the things I feel like I have gotten good at is I'll just, turn down clients. I'll be like, I just don't have the time and I can't give you my best effort if we can't meet at an agreeable time, days and stuff like that. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. Or, I just protect my time. The other thing too, which I think is really counter intuitive to a lot of people in my business, is like I only have LinkedIn and my YouTube for my show. I don't have Instagram. I don't have Twitter or formerly Twitter. I don't have any of that stuff. And I was told, well, you need that stuff to be successful. I'm like, no, you've been told you need that to be successful. I do my own thing. I look at what I think is good for me and what feels authentic for me, and I do that. And actually, the other day I was at Lululemon. I was in there talking to the store owner here in Fort Collins and a rep about some work we're going to do together. And they're like, what's your Instagram? I said, I don't have one. And they looked at me like I was crazy, like I was like just from somewhere nutty. I said, I just don't want to do that. It's just not me. And I don't want to follow what everyone else is doing. This has been me since I was in high school. I just want to do my own thing. I want to do what feels authentic to me. And not having that, it feels authentic to me. It may be great for other people, but for me, it just doesn't feel right. So I don't do it.
I think that's admirable. I think I was listening to one podcast or a conversation you were on or something, and somebody mentioned they followed you on Instagram, and you're like, you didn't follow me because I'm not on there. And they're like, well, who's this dancing person or something, right? Was that something that happened?
Yeah. Yeah. They followed. It was after it was funny. Like after I won that award this summer, and it's a big award in our industry. And I'm walking out, people are saying very nice things to me. I'm so appreciative of it. I'm walking out of the Los Angeles Convention Center, a couple of fitness professionals. Dr. D, oh man, congratulations. I just followed you on Instagram. I was like, there's no way you followed me on Instagram. I'm not on there. And they were like, well, who did I follow? I said, I have no clue.
That's hilarious. But I mean, I think so much of that, like when I think about what it is to, live an unmuted life, a lot of it is about making the decision to do what you want to do and not necessarily what everybody else expects you to do. There's a certain boldness in making that choice and a certain intentionality that I would imagine. I mean, what's the impact of that on your life? I mean, because I can spend way more time than I want to on Instagram. Might be the only other thing. LinkedIn I spend the most time on, but I sometimes feel this need of, I need to be more active on Instagram. I need to be documenting everything in my life. And I don't want to. Like, I don't want to have my camera out documenting 20 10-second clips of my day just so I can create a reel. Like, I don't want to do that. So what would you say to anyone that maybe feels that way?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, like, if you're feeling that way, that feeling is not going to change. It's not like you're going to wake up and go, yeah, I'm okay with this now. It's like anything. When you know something's bad or you get this feeling in your gut, like, man, I shouldn't be doing this, that's not going to go away. And I just always think, like, listen, I need to listen to myself. I need to listen to those feelings. And more than likely, honestly, you're not going to miss it. You're going to have a lot more time for other things in your life. And that, for me, like, I've crafted my life where I have a lot of time to do the things that I like to do. I mean, I love gardening. If I was doing all that stuff, I couldn't garden the way I want to garden or think about the things I want to plant for the spring and stuff like that. Be really intentional. I just don't want everyone knowing my personal business. Other than, I mean, it's fine if you want to know about me professionally, and I have lots of principles about caring about people, but I'm not putting stuff up, my daughter's pictures and stuff. First of all, she doesn't have consent for that. I don't want her going back and say, oh, I didn't consent to all these pictures you put up of me and all these things. It's her life. I want to respect her life. Same with my wife. And not everyone needs to know about what my comings and goings are at, my vacations. Like, that's for me. Like, that's my time. And I just like to protect that. And I don't want to document my life. I want to make an impact in what I'm doing professionally and have that show my personality and how I care about people. But I always thought it was crazy. Like, I remember when like Foursquare was out or whatever, and it was like, oh, here's the location. I'm at the movies. My whole thing, maybe this is a flaw in me, I kept thinking, like, man, somebody's gonna rob me. Like, they're gonna know I'm not at home and stuff like that. And like, I guess I grew up in the 80s, man. It was like, you don't tell people where you are or aren't all the time. Like, it's like a safety issue. So I feel for people growing up in this time because they don't feel that. It's not a natural feeling for them. But me, I don't want people to know where I'm at on vacation and stuff like that. I want that to be my time, my family's time, stuff like that. Even I tell my clients, they would be like, "Oh, did you see my pictures on Facebook?" I'm like, I'm not on there. And by the way, why don't you just send them directly to me? Why have a in between party? For that, like, just send this stuff to me. Why are we adding layers to this communication? That's literally what I would tell them. They're like, "Oh, you're right." I'm like, it's crazy to me.
Well, there can also be this sort of like, almost narcissistic thing that can come off when someone's like, "Oh, well, did you see what I posted? Did you see the thing that I shared?" It's like, no, I'm not following your stuff around all the time. Like,
No, I did not.
did not. Well, even I think like our producer, Tim, one of the things that he's really good at doing is if he's like on a walk or something, he'll just send me these. He lives in a place that's like very scenic. It's very beautiful, like by some lakes and trails and beautiful trees. And he'll just like send me a picture this morning of a beautiful like yellow leaved trees with this bright blue sky in the background. And it's like, what does that take? 5 seconds to find that picture and send it to somebody and say like, "Happy Unmuted Monday." But it's like those are the things that are meaningful to
Yeah,
people, you know? Um, so speaking of unpopular
yeah,
opinions,
most
um,
definitely.
so speaking of like unpopular opinions, like I'm curious, there's so many opinions in your industry, right? In the fitness and wellness and health industry. What are some other things that because this is a way I think we can mute ourselves when we're willing to kind of go against the norm, or not just for the sake of being different, but because we fundamentally have maybe a different perspective. Are there certain things that you have maybe like contradictory opinions or thoughts on? Anything that stands out to you in your space that is maybe different than what the mainstream thought or belief or perspective is?
All the time. I think that's my whole thing. When I go to speak at conferences, things of that nature, that's like my whole thing. One, I think one big one that I wouldn't say gets me in trouble is just people will ask me questions about it. And I always say, well, like we try to focus so much on this, just do something you love to do and you'll be consistent with it, with exercise. My thing is always like, well, I mean, is there improvement in that? Like, I just want to know, like, are you trying to improve or not to improve? Because if you're just trying to have maintenance, go roller skating every day, have a great time or that. But like, if you like, it's not a no pain, no gain. That's not a thing. That's garbage. But what I'm saying is like, improvement is hard, but we've tried to make improvement entertainment in fitness and wellness. We told, let's entertain ourselves. Let's distract ourselves from the fact that we're doing something that's uncomfortable. In fact, this is how crazy this has become. When I speak at conferences, the difference between now when I speak and when I would speak 15 years ago, I said something so radically crazy to a bunch of people I was speaking to the other day. And I was like, if I wouldn't have to say this like 15 years ago. I said, I want you to do something crazy. When you go work out, don't listen to music. And there was like, this one lady goes, big gasp. A bunch of people, I don't know if I can do that. I said, think about it this way. You're thinking about self-care, right? Getting back to yourself, being in touch with yourself, right? But my industry is telling you, distract yourself from what's happening. Distract yourself, be entertained, listen to stuff, hear stuff. But what if you actually listen to your breath? What if you listen to your footsteps? That's music too. It's a rhythm. There's a BPM to that. You're just not used to it. So I often have to tell people like, it's hard, so don't do it like all at once, but like tape yourself off of the things you listen to when you work out. Because if you really want to get close to yourself, you actually should listen to your body when you're going through the exertion. It's actually a really beautiful thing, but it's completely counterculture. Most of the people in my industry would say that's crazy. We got to do anything we can to get people to move and do stuff. I'm just like, listen, if everyone's trying to connect to themselves, why distract yourself? Like, try it out, especially like when people are running and stuff. First of all, it's a safety hazard. You can't hear anything, cars on the road. That seems, again, I'm old school with it. Like, I have my head on a swivel all the time. I'm always aware of my surroundings. And a lot of time you do that when you're connect to yourself for that.
Yeah.
So I think that having joy all the time when you exercise is a fallacy. It's great to enjoy it here and there, but improvement is difficult.
Mm,
Sometimes you're just not going to like it. You got to be okay with it.
mm,
It's like parenting. Parenting is hard. It's not this joyful experience constantly. Like that's ridiculous. It's like a lot of times hard, but there's joyful moments throughout it. But just to say it's just great all the time, that's not true. You're not giving people
mm.
the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I think it's like the need to find comfort and ease. Like there's a value in that, right? To not always be, I know like when you talk about hustle culture, like not always be in that mode all the time. Like there is value to ease and to comfort. But to your point, if you're trying to
Yeah.
improve something, it doesn't, just because it's, easy doesn't mean it's working. It's kind of like maybe the opposite, that when we have this, we're pushing through. Like I went on a walk the other day. I usually listen to a podcast or talk on the phone to somebody when I go on a walk, 99.9% of the time. And the other day I was like, let me just go on a walk without any headphones in, by myself. And I went on a walk for like 35 minutes and I heard things. Like I heard leaves crunching when I was walking. And I noticed just the sound of a car driving by, or the voices of little kids that were like playing in their yard. It's almost like a meditative experience. I wouldn't say like I'm like, I love distracting myself and making time go faster by like doubling up and getting in a phone call and catch up with a friend. And sometimes there's a place for that. But maybe just even encouraging people to like even like take a 10-minute walk without any other person and without anything in your ears, and just like notice what happens when you do that.
Yeah, I definitely it's an interval. Like I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I just think you shouldn't do it all the time. Like
Mm,
let's maybe one walk on it without anything. Next time we listen to a podcast. You can get a lot of knowledge from listening to things while you walk. It's great. I'm not against that. It's just like can't be every time.
mm,
It's like so I really try to get people is like if you want to go inward, the way inward is not often to distract yourself outwardly for that. So I know it's hard because we're so used to, we've been socialized into having distraction, but getting closer to yourself, a lot of times is just peeling away the layers
mm,
of the distraction for that.
mm,
So these are very unpopular a lot of times when I talk to people, but when they do it, they actually go, oh, wow, that was such a different experience. What the crazy thing is like, that's part of like growing up in a time without technology like this. And then with it is like, you remember what that's like. And I try to remember people who haven't grown up like I did. All they know is the distraction.
mm,
So when you tell them to release that, it's like mind blowing. It's literally mind blowing to them. And so it's just part of being yourself. I call them thinking walks. I like to walk too, and I have nothing because it just allows my thoughts to wander. And for me to,
mm,
that's where I get a lot of my great ideas. There's lots of research on this too about like when you're on planes or when you're in a car, and let's say you're not driving. Obviously, the plane, you're just sitting there. That's when a lot of great ideas come when you have no other stimulus because you
mm.
allow your creativity and your thoughts to just start glide. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, you know what? Here's a great idea. I feel sometimes the distraction mutes your ideas, actually.
Mm, mm. I can see that very much. I used to, when I would run more, I haven't really been running since my accident because of some cartilage damage I had in my ankle, and I just found other ways that I prefer to move now since that happened. But I used to get really great ideas when I would run, or even when I'm spinning, when I'm doing something like I'm on the Peloton, when I'm doing something that like requires me to be fully present, because it's like in order to like get up this hill, in order to get through this resistance, like I can't really be somewhere else. Like I have to be fully present to get my body to do the thing. And sometimes when I'm like pushing myself to that degree of discomfort and strain, it unlocks something mentally and physically. Is there like some science, like I'm just curious of like the science behind like why that happens?
You know what's interesting is let's take music or anything like that. There's lots of research that up to a certain BPM and a certain level of intensity, music is beneficial. Like it helps to increase effort level or intensity. But once the intensity level of the activity you're doing rises to where it's vigorous, you almost don't even hear the music anymore.
Mm.
You don't care. The other sounds start going away. It's because your body starts pulling inwards towards this is very difficult. I have to like focus on this. It's kind of like if you're driving, and maybe this is an old school analogy, if you're driving in a car, right, and you're listening to music and you're doing getting directions to go somewhere and you're getting really close, and what do people often do? They turn off the music before, because they really have to focus on where this place is I'm going to, because your mind cannot adapt to doing a lot of different things when the intensity level of focus is really high.
Mm.
So that's the other thing. Like if someone tells me, I had someone tell me they watch a movie when they work out, I was like, I can unequivocally tell you this workout was very moderate to low, and it was low intensity. I was like, because physiologically you would never be able to focus on that if the intensity level was at a point where stimulus that was greater than what you're used to. So the activity people tell me they're doing, or I'm like, it tells your intensity level. Like,
Mm.
are you just there to just move, which is fine, or be physically active? Or are you there to exercise, provide a stimulus that's greater than what you're used to? If you're there to exercise, you're more than likely not going to even be hearing the thing they're listening to.
Mm.
But there's the discomfort. We have to get okay with discomfort. I just look at discomfort as very, very temporary. Pain is
Mm.
temporary to me. I look at pain very differently. I'm like, it's just a temporary thing in my life. And,
Mm.
this is going to be really important in terms of creating increased capillary density, changing my VO2 max, all these, increased stroke volume, blood volume, all that stuff. This is just the price I'm paying to go
Mm.
to get a better version of me. And
Mm.
but this isn't anything. You want to be a better writer? It's going to be hard. You're going to have to write you want to write a book. How many people have I talked to on my podcast or you've talked to have written a book and they go, oh man, it took me forever. It's hard. Like if it was easy to write a book like 2 days, it would be nothing. Like it's okay. It's hard. Things are hard in life. You have to get used to it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm writing a book right now, and I've started writing books like 4 times, and I was like, I need an accountability person. I need someone who's I'm checking in with consistently, who is, going to be my like editing this, who's going to get it to a manuscript ready, version of what I'm writing so that I can then hand it off to a publisher. And I started writing my first book, started writing what I thought was going to be my first book like 8 years ago. And then I started writing another one 5 years ago. And now I'm like, I'm actually doing this. I'm on the 5th chapter. And I went and the next thing I have to do is a bunch of research. And I sat in the Towson University library for 2 hours on Friday afternoon and just pulled off 40 journal articles that I've had flagged that I know I had to go to university to get them. Inconvenient. But now I'm going to kill a bunch of trees, I guess, and print them all off this week and start highlighting and going through and working through that, because I know that's the next thing I need to do. It's not fun. That is not a fun part of writing a book or figuring out who I'm interviewing for different parts of it. That is a lot of work. Transcribing an interview takes 3 or 4 hours for me. It's very tedious.
Yeah.
And I know that I really want to do it. And I'm actually taking the steps to do it. And it's because of that back to accountability. It's because of the accountability that I'm actually going to do it this time. So,
Yeah.
So I want to share one last thing. Nathan put here, he said, you should have named this episode Mute Your Music and Unmute Your Mind. That was good. So I know we're going to drop in your social links.
It'll be very unpopular for a lot of people. They will not be happy.
They would not be happy. Especially as a musician, as a singer-songwriter. I'm play my song while you're running. But where can people best connect with you? We've dropped your links in the chat, but how can people best connect from you, learn from you?
Links in there are the best through my YouTube, which just has my show, Dr. D's Social Network, on there. Also through LinkedIn, which is easiest in terms of like any media online. If there's professional media, I consider it easy for there, or just emailing me at darianparker@gmail.com. I'll answer it very quickly. I'm a big email person. Love email, actually. Again, that's probably unpopular, but I really enjoy it still. And that's it. I make it very simple to get in touch with me. There's not like 20 different things or ways to get in touch with me. Email me, go to my LinkedIn, done.
Done. Mic drop. Perfect. There we go. Well, thank you so much for being here today, for taking the time out of grading papers to be a part of this conversation and sharing your wisdom and experience. And I know I'm feeling more motivated and inspired, and I'm going to continue to follow you and what you're doing because I think you're a really interesting person, and I'm glad that this community now knows you. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, everybody, we will be back in 2 weeks. We're going to take off next week. I hope everyone in the States has a happy Thanksgiving. We're going to be back on the 28th with our next guest. And then my next song will release end of that week or beginning of the following week. So thank you, everybody, so much. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.